Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Citrus, which is a 2013 release board game. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half to play and accommodates 2 to 5 players. Now the idea of the game is that we are trying to plant all these different fruits and make these plantations to score victory points. It's an area control and tile placement game. You are going to start with this huge board made up of these different squares, and in a few of those squares is going to be these thinkers, and the thinkers are what are going to be the kind of thing you're trying to control in order to score those points. And the game is broken down into 2 very simple choices. The first choice is going to be to take a bunch of tiles and place them onto the board. When you take a bunch of tiles, you take them off this very cool market mechanism where there's almost this crosshatch of grids, and you're either going to take a row of column of tiles paying the equal cost to the amount of tiles you've taken, and you're going to place them onto the board, complying to certain restrictions. So there's 5 different types of fruit that you can build, all represented by a different color, and each thinker has to have an individual color coming off of it. And then you can either kind of start a new thinker or start a new plantation from a thinker, or you can add one to an existing one. And when you start a new kind of plantation, you're going to have to take one of your kind of pawns off your board and put it onto those onto that bunch of tiles. And there's a cool thing to that which kind of corresponds to the second mechanism, where the more kind of workers you place onto the board, when you pull them off the board and get points for the amount of tiles that you control, you get a certain amount of money. But the more workers you have on your board when you do pull them off is going to be more cost effective, because you're going to get more money if you have more workers on your board, and if you kind of have more people onto the board, you're going to get less money. So some of the other restrictions are that you cannot basically touch somebody else's plantations of the same type, basically just to keep, or not to muddy the waters and to know who controls what. But you can actually connect your 2 different plantations together if you've got 2 separate plantations, and really can kind of control the map that way. There's a lot of cutting off and stuff, but basically once the thinkers are controlled or completely surrounded, then the majority of tiles connected to it, controlled by a certain player, is going to score the higher amount of points associated to that thinker, and the second place is going to score the lower amount of points to that. And obviously 3rd or 4th place are going to score nothing at all. And once a thinker is completed, it's going to flip down, face down, and not going to be scored again for the rest of the game. But every time the market goes below a certain amount of tiles on there, then not only are more tiles going to be drawn onto the board, but also a new thinker is going to be placed as well. So there's a lot of trying to control different regions of the board, being careful about to have that constant flow of economy flow, basically, of having your money, because you can't just keep putting workers onto the board, because you're not only going to have nothing to place onto the board, but you're going to run out of money as well. So that goes to the second action. So the second action is when you harvest, and when you harvest, you're basically sacrificing your ability to control that plantation, but you're also, as I said, going to take money. And then you're going to score 1 point for each tile in that plantation, plus an additional point for a tile with a fountain on them. So there's quite a lot of points in this game. As you get big clusters, you're going to get a big amount of points in return. And also there's different kind of rewards scattered about on the board as well, where if you claim that kind of region with one of your tiles, you're going to get additional money or additional points, which are put face down for endgame scoring. You are going to be able to build bridges over certain spots that you can't normally build over. You can move these balls around, which kind of shut off regions in terms of scoring thinkers. So there's really is a lot to think about. The game almost has this abstract style feel to it, where the information on the board is pretty, it's next to perfect, really. The only thing that you can't foretell is the market board. You don't know what tiles are going to be coming up in future rounds. You don't know what thinkers are going to be coming up in future rounds. But you've got an educated idea of where they can come up, because all future thinkers are restricted to 1 of 3 places, which modifies as the game goes on. Then whoever's triggered that part of the game gets to choose where the thinkers go, which can really benefit them and hinder the other player. But the trick of the game is connecting those huge pathways, blocking other players from scoring huge things, trying to score a few thinkers at the same time. Lots of things like that. So that it almost has this if you're familiar with Reiner Knizia games, this one does kind of hark back to games like Blue Lagoon or Through the Desert. Again, where you are just building tiles off orthogonal kind of directions, trying to cut off other players, trying to score different thinkers. So mechanically, the game is extremely simple. Just either buy a bunch of tiles and place them, or harvest your tiles, or harvest your plantations and take a bunch of points, but obviously sacrifice your area controlling ability. It's a really clean game in terms of its mechanisms. So in terms of being overwrought or having needless rules, then this game has none of that. So it's a very clean design, and one where the rules overhead is more than manageable in terms of the depth and complexity what the game offers. Balance of the game as well is fantastic. I mean, obviously there is kind of some locations of the board which have these kind of opportunity tiles that you can take. They're going to be better than others, but you're not restricted to going anywhere. I mean, everybody's showing the same board. The market is really cool, and you've got to factor in, what you're leaving your opponents, because obviously the conditions are constantly changing. Because if you take a row or column, you're making things cheaper for the other players. And everybody's going to be fighting over the same tiles at time, and you've got to bear that in mind as well in your kind of thought process, because other players getting tiles at certain times can be vital to their game plan. Time investment wise, this game takes again about an hour to an hour and a half to play. There is a site, or the board is double-sided, where you can play a shorter game if you want to and get that time down. But turns are ultra quick, and even when someone's kind of brains pulling them in different directions and they don't know what to do with their turn, you can still think about what you want to do. So you're not really just sat there twiddling your thumbs. You're always going to find yourself engaged with this one. Replayability wise as well, I mean, obviously there's going to be different setup on the different bonus tiles you're going to get. You're going to get the market being different all the time. But again, a lot with these kind of, although this isn't an abstract game, it always does have that abstract feel to it. It almost has that timeless feel to it, where you're going to want to play it again and again and again. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a game I'm going to be getting to the table a lot of times, because I don't feel like I need to. I think it's a game that can happily sit in your collection and not date at all, because I think this does have an evergreen feel to it. And when you do feel the need for that abstract, puzzly, kind of it's quite heavy on conflict, I suppose. When you're feeling for a game of that niche, then this one is going to really shine out to you. Aesthetically, the game, it looks pretty nice. I mean, it's got nice bright colours, bright tiles on them, but it's still pretty muted. There's not a lot of flair on the board. It's a very, very basic board, just made up of a grid really, with a few bits of artwork on them. Very basic looking, but still pleasant looking. And the component quality is absolutely fine. Theme-wise, I think it works well. The idea of building these different plantations and harvesting all your different fruit, it just works fine. The progression of the game is really good. I mean, the game, it just gets bigger and bigger as you play. Obviously, the map is filling up, and it also has this very cool idea where if you have a neutral bunch of tiles, which have obviously already been harvested, and you connect your bunch of tiles to that, then you can claim that for your own, as long as you are equal or bigger than it. So again, it's a way that you can squeeze more points out of existing tiles on the board. You can use that to control other regions, and it's just, it has a great sense of progression as the game gets tighter and tighter as it goes on, but the opportunities to score are still there. Scalability wise as well, I mean, this game scales really well. Most games like this don't work well at 2 players, but this one works exceptionally well at 2 players. And equally well up to that higher player count. I think I'd probably play this, I wouldn't play this at more than 4. I mean, the game does support 5, but I think 4 or less is going to be the sweet spot, particularly at probably 2 or 3 for me. And again, comparison-wise, as I mentioned, this almost does feel like a Reiner Knizia game to me. Through the Desert and Blue Lagoon have a very similar feel to it, but this one just feels like a little bit more refined and a little bit more sophisticated than those two, whilst those two have a slight smaller barrier to entry, while still having a lot going on in them. But this one I think this one is slightly, or is definitely more my cup of tea. Has more kind of a Euro mechanism to it, and I absolutely adore that market mechanism. I think it's so great. I mean, I love stuff like that where you're taking rows or columns, constantly changing the board state and the opportunities that other players can take. I love the tough decisions of what you're going to sacrifice to get money into your bank, because there are often times where you just do not want to take your workers off the board because you are in great positions, and that really is a trick to having that constant flow of putting people on, taking them off the board. And you can really leave yourself high and dry if you just constantly build these huge plantations, because, you know, if you're still connected to a thinker and that's yet to score, and you've got no money in the bank, you're going to have to pull one of those guys off and get a small amount of, you're going to get a lot of points in return, but you're also going to get a small amount of coinage, and basically sacrifice your ability to connect or to score those thinkers. So it has a really cool push and pull mechanism to it, where you want to keep things on the board, but you have to pull them off. So a really cool idea, and really hard decisions to make in the game. Knowing when to cut off your opponents in relation to when to kind of capitalize on by yourself, it's really great. There's so many great decisions in this game, and I really rate it if you like your tough decision Euro games, but with that element of being abstract and cutting off. There's embedded player interaction in the game there that you just are going to be fighting over certain spots, which is absolutely great. So overall, this one really is, it really did surprise me in a very positive way. I was recommended this game by one of my listeners, actually, or one of my watchers. He said, from the games I recommended before, he recommended this one for me because he thought I'd enjoy it, and I absolutely did. I love this game. I think it's fantastic, and it's staying in my collection. Baffles me how this game is not rated higher and is not talked about more, because it is so pure and so clean, but still having great decisions that go into it. I think it's rated 1500 or so on Board Game Geek, which is absolutely baffling to me. But yeah, if you like tile placement games, you like a bit of conflict, you like an interesting market system, you like points galore, this one is definitely one to check out. It's a fantastic game. It gets an excellent verdict from me, which is an 8 out of 10. And again, staying in my collection. I'm happily going to play this one again many times to come. So that is Citrus, a really great game. So I hope you enjoyed this review of Citrus. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.